Throughout the multiple seasons of Stranger Things, we were introduced to a town that slowly became more and more dangerous, with each season escalating the threats from missing children to full-blown psychological horror. But what would happen if some of the most iconic TV show characters were suddenly dropped into Hawkins? From serial killers like Dexter Morgan to criminal masterminds like Walter White, in today's video, I'll be ranking how long these TV characters could realistically survive the events of Stranger Things season by season. To start, let's go over how I'll be ranking survival in this video. For this tier list, I'll be using the 5 seasons of Stranger Things as 5 different survival tiers, with tier 1 representing the weakest characters and tier 5 representing the absolute best of the best. The higher a character ranks, the further they'll be able to survive as the threats in Hawkins continue to escalate. Starting all the way at the bottom in tier 1, I have characters who I believe wouldn't make it past the earliest stages of Hawkins. This tier is based on season 1, where the primary threat is the Demogorgon during the search for Will Byers. Moving up to tier 2, these are characters who I think could survive into season 2, but would ultimately fall short once the Mind Flayer becomes the central threat. Unlike the Demogorgon, the danger here isn't just a single creature, it's possession, paranoia, and the spreading influence of the Upside Down. Above that is tier 3, which represents season 3. This is where the Mind Flayer takes on a physical form, turning Hawkins into an active war zone. Characters here would have to survive large-scale attacks, evade a possessed Billy, infiltrate the Russian underground operation beneath Starcourt Mall, and escape a full-blown battle in a crowded public space. Next is tier 4, based on season 4, where survival becomes almost entirely psychological. Vecna doesn't hunt people in the traditional sense, he targets guilt, trauma, and suppressed memories. Victims are pulled into violent trances and forced to relive their darkest moments before being brutally killed. And finally, at the very top in tier 5, I have characters who I believe could realistically survive all 5 seasons of Stranger Things, including season 5, where the threat escalates to an open war between Hawkins, the Upside Down, and the real world. This tier represents characters capable of navigating Dimension X, sneaking past military operations, surviving large-scale biological threats from the fully unleashed Mind Flayer, and making it out alive during the final battle to end the invasion once and for all. Now that we've established the rules and the tiers, let's start with our first character, Rick Grimes. When it comes to Rick Grimes, I think he's actually one of the few characters on this list who could realistically make it all the way to the end of Stranger Things. And the reason isn't just brute force, it's experience. Rick has survived over 20 years in a post-apocalyptic world filled with relentless, inhumane threats, and at times, the chaos of the zombie apocalypse mirrors the environment of the Upside Down more than people realize. Both worlds are defined by constant danger, uncertainty, and the need to adapt quickly or die. Rick has also endured an unimaginable amount of loss. He's lost friends, family, leaders, and entire communities, and unlike many characters, he doesn't suppress that trauma. He's confronted it over and over again throughout The Walking Dead, which is exactly why I believe he wouldn't immediately fall to Vecna in season 4. Vecna preys on unresolved guilt and buried memories, but Rick has already relived his worst moments countless times. That psychological exposure gives him a level of mental resilience most characters simply don't have. On top of that, Rick is highly strategic, disciplined, and extremely capable with firearms. That alone gives him a massive edge in later seasons, especially when it comes to surviving Russian operations beneath Starcourt Mall or navigating military-controlled zones in season 5. He understands stealth, movement, and when to engage versus when to disappear. Rick doesn't rush into danger blindly, he adapts, observes, and strikes when necessary. That said, Rick survives because he's built for chaos, but not everyone on this list relies on strength or courage alone. Some characters survive by talking their way out, slipping through cracks, and avoiding danger altogether, which brings us to Saul Goodman. Unlike Rick, Saul isn't built for combat or confrontation, he's built for escape. And in the world of Stranger Things, that skill alone takes him surprisingly far. I genuinely believe Saul could survive all the way up to season 4. Saul's biggest advantage is that he closely mirrors someone we already know thrives in Hawkins, Murray. Time and time again, Murray talks his way out of situations that should realistically get him killed, and Saul operates on that exact same wavelength, just more selfishly. When faced with the Russian underground operation in season 3, Saul wouldn't try to fight or investigate. Instead, he'd negotiate, lie, flatter, or redirect blame until he slips through the cracks. He knows how to read people, exploit authority structures, and say exactly what needs to be said to survive one more day. That same self-preservation instinct is also why Saul avoids many of the physical dangers that wipe out stronger characters. When the Mind Flayer becomes a full physical threat in season 3, Saul isn't sticking around to play hero. He runs, he hides, he lets other people draw attention while he disappeared. And honestly, that cowardice works in his favor for a long time. But season 4 is where Saul's luck finally runs out. Berkman doesn't care how clever you are, how fast you talk, or how many exits you plan ahead of time. This threat can be bargained with. Underneath all of Saul's scams, manipulation, and moral shortcuts, we know one thing is true: he feels guilt. Deep guilt. And Vecna would drag every buried regret, every ruined life, and every moment Saul tried to laugh off straight into the open. With nowhere to run and no one to talk to, Saul would ultimately break inside Vecna's hellscape, meeting a brutal end he can't con his way out of. And if Saul fails because he hides from his guilt, the next character fails for the opposite reason, because he obsesses over it: Joe Goldberg. In this scenario, I think Joe realistically survives up until season 2 of Stranger Things, and his downfall comes not from fear or incompetence, but from how disturbingly compatible he is with the Mind Flayer itself. Early on, Joe actually does fine. Season 1 rewards secrecy, observation, and staying close to other people, and that's Joe's entire skill set. He blends into Hawkins easily, inserts himself into the group, and watches from the sidelines while other people take risks. He's careful, quiet, and always positioning himself where he can see everything without being seen. That alone is enough to get him through Demogorgon encounters and the initial chaos surrounding Will's disappearance. Season 2 is where things change. The Mind Flayer isn't just hunting bodies anymore, it's looking for access. It preys on isolation, internal conflict, and people who already carry something broken inside them. And Joe is the perfect candidate. Unlike other characters who fight possession or panic at the idea of losing control, Joe would rationalize it. He would convince himself that the Mind Flayer understands him, that it validates his darkest impulses, and that giving in is a form of clarity rather than corruption. That's what makes Joe so dangerous and so doomed. He wouldn't resist possession the way others do, he would allow it, believing that the voice in his head is simply revealing his true self. And once that happens, Joe stops being a survivor and becomes a weapon. By the time the group realizes what's wrong with him, it's already too late. He's no longer hiding, he's fully consumed. Joe doesn't die fighting the Mind Flayer, he dies because he accepts it. And if Joe represents someone who willingly gives into the darkness, the next character represents someone who desperately tries to escape it: Barry Berkman. I think Barry realistically survives all the way up until season 4 of Stranger Things, and for the first half of the series, he's honestly one of the most effective survivors on this list. From seasons 1 through 3, Barry absolutely thrives. Unlike most characters here, he's not just familiar with firearms, he's elite with them. Barry's background as a trained killer means he understands stealth, positioning, and controlled violence better than almost anyone else. Demogorgons aren't overwhelming him early on, and when the Russians enter the picture in season 3, Barry is perfectly suited for that environment. Underground hallways, tight corridors, silent takedowns, this is where he's most dangerous. He wouldn't charge in recklessly, and he wouldn't panic. He'd move carefully, eliminate threats quietly, and disappear before anyone even realized he was there. What's important though is that Barry isn't evil in the way the Mind Flayer looks for. Despite everything he's done, Barry has a genuinely good heart buried underneath his violence and confusion. That's why I don't think he gets consumed or possessed in season 2. He feels guilt, remorse, and conflict, but he doesn't embrace the darkness the way someone like Joe does. He resists it. But season 4 is where Barry's story ends. Vecna doesn't care how skilled you are or how many enemies you've killed. Vecna targets unresolved trauma, and Barry is drowning in it. His PTSD, the people he's hurt, the lives he's taken, these are memories Barry hasn't processed or forgiven himself for. Vecna would force him to relive everything he's been running from, and this time Barry wouldn't be able to pull the trigger or escape. The weight of those memories would consume him completely, leading to a brutal and inevitable death inside Vecna's trance. And if Barry fails because his trauma finally catches up to him, the next character wins for a very different reason: because he runs straight towards the chaos. Billy Butcher. I genuinely think Billy is one of the few characters on this list who could realistically make it all the way to season 5 of Stranger Things, and that's because the threats in Hawkins wouldn't be the most terrifying things he's ever faced, not even close. Billy has spent years fighting Supes, beings that are arguably more unpredictable, violent, and unstoppable than any Demogorgon or physical manifestation of the Mind Flayer. Where most people would panic at the sight of something unnatural, Billy doesn't freeze, he escalates. The Mind Flayer wouldn't intimidate him the way it does to others, and when it comes to season 3's chaos, Billy is perfectly suited for it. Russian operations, underground facilities, armed soldiers, hostile territory, that's familiar ground. Billy would fight his way through military checkpoints, gun down Russian forces without hesitation, and keep moving forward while everyone else is trying to process what's happening. Season 4 is where things get dangerous for him. Vecna's trance attacks aren't about strength or courage, they're about breaking the mind, and we've already seen that Billy's mental state isn't exactly stable. By the end of The Boys, Billy is clearly unraveling, barely holding himself together through rage and self-destruction. Vecna would absolutely target that. He would drag Billy into memories of loss, betrayal, and everything he sacrificed in his war against monsters. But here's the difference. Billy has already stared into that abyss and come back out. Even when his mind starts to fracture, he pushes forward, becoming more dangerous rather than collapsing. He survives Vecna's influence not because he heals, but because he embraces the destruction and keeps going. And in the final battle of season 5, even without enhanced abilities, Billy's courage, brutality, and refusal to back down makes him a key player in taking down the Mind Flayer once and for all. And if Billy survives by sheer force of will, the next character survives by something far more calculated: Walter White. I believe Walter realistically makes it up until season 4 of Stranger Things, and for seasons 1 through 3, he's honestly one of the most dangerous assets the Hawkins group could possibly have. Walter's greatest weapon isn't brute force, it's intelligence. Faced with the Demogorgons early on, Walter wouldn't rely on guns or panic-driven attacks. He would experiment, he would improvise. Given access to even basic materials, Walter could create explosive compounds, chemical traps, or incendiary devices far more effective than the fireworks used to take down the physical Mind Flayer in season 3. In fact, Walter would likely be the reason the group survives that season at all. His ability to plan several steps ahead, map out contingencies, and weaponize limited resources gives him an edge few characters can't match. He also thrives under pressure. Chaos doesn't overwhelm Walter, it sharpens him. While others react emotionally, he calculates outcomes, assigns roles, and turns impossible situations into controlled explosions. From Russian operations beneath Starcourt Mall to large-scale monster encounters, Walter would be instrumental in keeping people alive far longer than expected. But season 4 is where Walter finally breaks. Physically, he's already running on borrowed time. Whether it's cancer, lingering effects from chemotherapy, or sheer exhaustion, his body is failing him, and Vecna doesn't need much more than that. Unlike previous threats, Vecna doesn't attack the body, he dismantles the mind. Walter would be forced to relive the family he abandoned, the chaos he caused, and the empire he built at the cost of everyone he claimed to love. We've already seen that guilt consume him in Breaking Bad, ultimately driving him to seek a twisted form of redemption through violence. Vecna would rip that buried guilt straight to the surface, unraveling Walter completely and leading to his brutal end. And if Walter falls because of his guilt finally outweighing his brilliance, the next character survives by eliminating guilt altogether: Michael Scofield. I think Michael Scofield could very possibly make it to the end of Stranger Things, and the reason is rather simple. Hawkins is one giant puzzle, and Michael Scofield is built to solve impossible systems. Michael's intelligence isn't just high, it's architectural. He doesn't react to danger, he studies it. Demogorgons wouldn't overwhelm him because he wouldn't confront them blindly. He'd map their movement patterns, exploit their weaknesses, and design escape routes before anyone else even realized they were trapped. The Russian underground operation in season 3 is where Michael truly shines. Secure facilities, layered defenses, guards, patrol routes, this is literally what he does. He has escaped some of the most secure prisons in the world, which proves he's not just good at solving puzzles, but at manipulating entire environments to work in his favor. When it comes to the Mind Flayer's physical form, Michael wouldn't rely on raw power or desperation. He'd coordinate the group with precision, improving on their existing plan and turning it into something far more efficient. Think of it as the Kids season 3 strategy, but refined, optimized, and executed with near perfect timing. Even Vecna isn't untouchable to someone like Michael. While Vecna attacks psychologically, Michael's strength lies in compartmentalization. He doesn't ignore trauma, he locks it away and focuses on the objective. That mental discipline alone gives him a fighting chance against trance-based attacks. By season 5, when Hawkins becomes a full-scale war zone involving the military, the Upside Down, and the Mind Flayer's largest biological form yet, Michael doesn't just survive, he surpasses. He would outmaneuver military operations, predict movements, and ultimately help defeat the Mind Flayer by elevating the original plan tenfold. And if Michael represents pure logic and system mastery, the second to last character represents something far more dangerous: the serial killer we all know and love, Dexter Morgan. Dexter could make it all the way to season 5 of Stranger Things, and it's because Hawkins rewards the exact skills Dexter has spent his entire life refining: stealth, patience, and the ability to operate in the shadows without being seen. From the very beginning, Dexter would excel. He's extremely sneaky, methodical, and calculated, the kind of person who wouldn't run from Demogorgons but study them. He learned their patterns, set traps, and ambush them when the odds are in his favor. By season 3, when the Mind Flayer becomes a physical presence, Dexter would be one of the few characters capable of helping devise a real plan to take it down. He's used to hunting monsters that hide in plain sight, and he understands how to strike surgically rather than emotionally. A lot of people might argue that Dexter would be vulnerable in season 2, that the Mind Flayer could possess him, but I don't think that holds up. At the end of the day, Dexter does have a moral center. It might be twisted, but it is real. He's followed a code for decades, resisted darker impulses, and proven that he won't fully surrender himself to evil. That internal structure is exactly what keeps him from being consumed. However, season 4 is the real test. On paper, Vecna should destroy Dexter by forcing him to relive his traumatic childhood, but especially in Resurrection, we see a Dexter who has lived long enough to confront those memories, accept what shaped them, and come to terms with the things he's done. Vecna thrives on unresolved guilt, and Dexter has already stared his past in the face, then kept moving. By season 5, Dexter's willingness to make impossible decisions becomes an asset. He'd slip past military forces, operate where others hesitate, and have the courage to do what needs to be done to finally end the Mind Flayer. And if Dexter survives because he's learned to live with his darkness, the final character pushes through various seasons because he understands it. Rust Cohle. When it comes to Rust Cohle, I think he makes it far, but not all the way. Realistically, Rust survives up until season 4 of Stranger Things, and for the majority of the series, he's actually one of the most effective people you could possibly drop into Hawkins. Rust has something that very few characters on this list possess: the courage to face the unknown without needing to rationalize it away. From the moment strange disappearances start happening, Rust wouldn't dismiss them as coincidence or hysteria. He would lean into it. He's drawn to the unexplained, obsessed with patterns that don't make sense, and that alone drastically accelerates the search for Will Byers in season 1. Rust wouldn't waste time debating whether something supernatural is happening. He'd accept it early and start mapping it. In the earlier seasons, Rust thrives immensely. His investigative instincts combined with his intelligence allow him to connect dots faster than anyone else in Stranger Things. He embeds himself in the mystery, studies the Upside Down like a crime scene, and treats Hawkins as a system that can be understood. Add in the fact that Rust is experienced with firearms, comfortable in violent environments, and capable of defending himself under pressure, and he becomes incredibly difficult to eliminate through seasons 1 to 3. But season 4 is where Rust's journey ends. Vecna doesn't attack logic, he attacks the parts of you that never healed. Rust is deeply isolated, emotionally scarred, and haunted by his past. He's survived by distancing himself from life, meaning, and connection. Vecna would force him to relive everything he's buried: loss, grief, nihilism, and years of depression he never truly escaped. And unlike characters who repress guilt, Rust feels it constantly. Vecna would amplify that pain 100 times worse. In the end, Rust doesn't die because he's weak, he dies because he's already been living in a mental hellscape. His sacrifice, however, wouldn't be meaningless. Rust would likely uncover truths about the Upside Down far earlier than anyone else, helping the group understand the nature of Hawkins' horror long before his tragic end. Now, there's probably arguments that can be made to move these characters into different tiers, but I feel like my choices were mainly accurate. As always, leave a comment down below describing where you guys might have ranked these characters within the mysterious world of Stranger Things. If you want to dive even deeper into these topics with exclusive videos, guaranteed replies, and your name featured at the end of every upload, you can become a channel member for just $2.99. It helps out a ton and keeps this content going. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to keep the conversation going, hop into the Discord where we talk about all your favorite shows and media. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.